Welcome to the Beyond Belief podcast. My name is Chris Setti, and with me, as always, is
Marnee.
yes, my goddess of a wife. She's feeling salty today too, which will be good. This will be
Yes.
good commentary.
Yes, I am feeling salty.
But here at the Beyond Belief podcast, what we do is we take things that people believe and have believed and continue to believe, and all the different beliefs that humanity has come up with, and we kind of trace them back and see like where they came from and is there anything to them?
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert. There usually never
Never
is.
isn't.
Because belief is like that kind of a funny thing. It's not about knowledge. That's why we call it belief. It's not stuff you know. We all have a bunch of beliefs. We have to because there's so much that we don't understand about the world. And we fill that space with ideas typically given to us by someone else that we see on the internet or we heard in church or we read in a book or what have you.
Yeah. There's typically some psychological need.
Sure.
Psychological benefit we're getting from our belief.
Yeah, it's like a confluence of all kinds of things. That was why we latch on to certain things and don't.
Yeah.
Today, though, I want to talk about one that has all of a sudden become circulating around. It's something that is not new, by the way. It's been in the works for a long time, relatively, when you consider like technology. And that's 5G. And the reason it's come up is because all of a sudden people are spreading rumors that 5G technology is going to activate the coronavirus inside your body, and that's what's happening. You know, most people didn't even think about 5G or didn't even hear about 5G, or maybe they heard about.
Some conspiracy people were talking about it, but it's come to more awareness as coronavirus is bringing
Sure.
it.
Now, when you search coronavirus, all this
People
shit
were
comes up.
already developing these. They're just using coronavirus to give it a platform.
Right. So I want to talk about 5G and the conspiracies around it. We're not going to delve super deep. I'm going to rely more on you actually to come up to feed me because I don't give a shit about what wacky people who change
So
their
you
name
aren't
to
paying
some animal.
attention, whereas in my world, I'm seeing it come across my
Right.
Facebook feed, people's fears and concerns, and I don't know anything about it. So I was like, what?
One thing you'll notice about these conspiracy theories is that they all follow the same model. Whether it's 5G or chemtrails or vaccines or fluoride in the water making you gay, which is an actual conspiracy theory, all of these things all have a framework that they're built on. The skin doesn't really matter, right? Your personality and your exposure and your concerns and whatever, all the whole millions of variables come together to determine what it is that you fucking put on there.
Yeah.
But the framework is kind of the same. And it depends on this idea of some nefarious cabal of organized people with a common goal are working to somehow harm you. It depends who you are, what that is, and how the outcome and who the boogeyman is, who's the them in this situation, or the they, or they're doing this. Well, who's them? Well, they all follow the same thing. And 5G, the 5G conspiracies are no different. The way I want to approach this is by explaining to you how all this works, which I hope I can do. Okay. So like my career, actually, just to give you a background on me, my career has been spent in the world of developing, implementing, inventing, and advancing computer networking technologies. I've worked for companies that built the stuff that send the signals around the world over fiber optic cables and wireless signals and copper cables and you name it. And part of that world are these wireless mobile communications at 5G, which stands for fifth generation, by the way. It's just fifth generation. It's just the next one. Remember your phone used to say 4G up in the corner, you know? And then we said LTE, which was like a little bit faster. That stands for long-term evolution, by the way. That's what LTE stands for. And 5G is just the fifth generation of mobile technology. And we're going to talk about what that means, okay? Because it sounds so scary when you read these articles and they're throwing numbers at you and talking about frequencies and wavelengths and all of these things. People don't really understand what they're talking about. So it sounds scary because the unknown is always super scary. And when you start going, well, we're going from this frequency to this frequency, and it seems like a huge number, and you're like, oh my God. So I'm going to try and put this in like perspective of what the fuck is going on and show you that not only are all the things that people are saying out there that cell phones and wireless technology are doing to you are false, they're impossible. And one thing we need to understand is that when the radio was invented in 1895, and then it kind of proliferated to where it was all over the place by the early 20th century, they literally coined a term called radiophobia. It was people that were afraid of these radio signals, right? They thought, holy shit, you're telling me that these things are beaming through the sky, so when I walk outside, they're going through my body? What are they doing to me? This was a concern. Just like how trains were like, people can't travel 30 miles an hour, right? The fastest they can go is on a fucking horse. Going that fast will literally cause us to like dematerialize into particles and fall apart, right? People thought that when trains were invented, right? But you don't turn your radio on and go like, is this dangerous to me? Because enough time has passed and stuff, and we understand. Now, all along the way, when cell phones became popular in the late 90s, there were a group of people, they didn't have the internet. They did, but you weren't on it. I remember getting fucking emails, because I had a cell phone and email early on. Again, I worked in this industry, so it was like I got all that shit. And I remember getting emails and like forwarded emails talking about how the proliferation of cell phone usage is going to cause a huge tick up in brain cancer and all this kind of shit. And then later on, when they decided, hey, let's go a little faster with our cell phones, and they did some stuff, they're like, this is going to kill us. And then wireless networks came around, and they had to like, all of a sudden we're like, wait, I'm going to put this in my house, and that's going to kill us. And then we're going to make wireless faster, and that's going to kill us. So this is not like a new thing. 5G does not represent like, hey, we've been fine, but now this is too far. No, every fucking thing that ever happens has a group of people that spread ideas about how it's dangerous and how there are people in control of it that are fucking with us.
I just didn't have
for some reason.
I just didn't have social media to have access to those stories, so I didn't know that those were happening back then.
But they were out there. Okay, so in order to explain this, I'm going to have to use terms and ideas that you can't see any of this shit. It's all in your mind, right? It's real, but we can't sense it with any of our senses. We're limited. So it becomes this kind of unknown nebulous thing that can be kind of confusing. But I want to introduce some of these topics by using maybe a more familiar, because we're all on the internet and we hear certain things out there, but it will help us kind of understand as we move into like explaining how these wireless communications work. Okay. And so I'm going to use the digital world first. Do you know what that means? Like when you hear like analog versus digital, do you know what that means?
I have. Analog is slower, less, or something like less.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So when we talk about things being, let me just do it this way. We're not going to talk about the difference, because analog, we don't need to worry about that. But when we talk about something being digital, what that means is the information that we're sending, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a video file or an email or a picture or a text or whatever, is sent by taking that information and breaking it down into like fundamental components.
Okay.
And the fundamental components are digits, right? That's why it's called a digital.
Yeah. Is that the ones and zeros?
They're the ones and zeros. It's a binary system. It can either be a 1 or a 0. It's like an old light switch, not a dimmer or some shit like that. It can either be on or off. That's a binary thing, a light switch. It can be on or off. You put it in the middle, it doesn't do shit, right? Because it doesn't have a middle setting, right? There's just one or the other. So digital refers to the fact that it uses a binary system where like we break everything down into the smallest component, which is called a bit.
Okay.
A 0 or a 1. That's called a bit. Okay.
So when they talk about gigabits, and
exactly, and the way that's notated is as a lowercase b means bit. Okay. And when we measure like internet speed, if you go to like speedtest.net or some site like that and you test your internet speed, it's going to give you a result that's going to be something like 30 capital M little b ps, which means megabits per second. Okay. The bits refers to a 1 or a 0. Okay. A bit. 1 digit.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So when we're talking about bits, we express speed in bits. So when your internet says you have 30 megabit per second connection, that means 30 We're going to get to this in a second, so don't worry about that. But the mega means million. 30 million bits per second are coming into your house. Okay? But when we need to express maybe like storage capacity, using the smallest thing is kind of, it'd be like, let's count people by the number of molecules in them or atoms. You know what I'm saying? So we group them together. Okay. And that's called a byte. So when you take 8 bits and you put it into a group, that's called a byte. And that's notated by a capital B. Which is why when you buy a computer, it might say you have a terabyte, capital B, TB, hard drive. That's how much it can store, which is a trillion 8-bit chunks, right? So 8 trillion bits. But I mean, a trillion bytes, a terabyte.
A terabyte is a trillion bytes.
So bits and bytes, right?
Yep.
I mean, in like the world I lived in, we would split bytes up into 2 groups of 4. They were called nibbles. They had sense of humor. they were messing around. They were having fun with it when they came up with all this shit. Okay. The only reason I bring that up is because it's familiar. But now we're going to get into the parts that we need to understand, because this is a world of numbers that make no sense to us.
Yeah.
This is a world of numbers that go on and on and on and on, and they're just symbolic to us. They're just really big numbers, and that's what confuses us, especially when it comes to 5G conspiracies. It can confuse us because we see these ranges of numbers being thrown at us, and we think it means something, but we have to put it in perspective of like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then we'll see, oh shit, it means nothing, right? So when you're scaling up, right? So like I said, mega, right? So we start with K. Kilo, right? That's 1,000. So like a kilobyte is 1,000 bytes. A kilobit per second connection would be 1,000 bits per second. Okay? That's the K. That's so old school. We don't even fucking give a shit about that. I mean, that happens inside of your shit and everything, but like no connection is down there, right? The M stands for mega, which is millions. Okay? So if you say megabit, million bits. Megabyte, million bytes. Okay? Billion is giga, right? A lot of people have heard that before, like, oh, gigabyte or a gigabit. Okay. That's billion.
Okay.
Trillion is tera. Okay. Hey, we have a friend named Tara. Shout out. Her name comes from the word for earth, actually, which is appropriate for her. But like, tera means trillion. So a terabyte is a trillion bytes. Okay. Most computers you would buy today would have at least a terabyte hard drive, probably.
Okay.
And that's a trillion bytes that it can store. Okay. Then it gets bigger, though. So then the next step from trillion is quadrillion, right? And that's a peta is the word that they use for that. So a petabyte would be a quadrillion bytes. Okay. And then if you get up to a quintillion bytes, right? That's a 1 with 18 zeros behind it. Okay. That's a big fucking number, right? That's called an exabyte.
Okay.
So those are the prefixes that are used to denote that level of stuff. And those numbers scale huge, right? But we need to understand this kind of lexicon, because when we talk about the electromagnetic spectrum, which is what 5G is all about and what all these fears are all about, what all the fears since the radio was invented is about, by the way, uses this. And we need to understand the great vast distance between these numbers, right? They're not steps. They're giant fucking leaps into space distance, right? And I hope I can help people visualize just how vast this is, right? And so with that in mind, we need to talk about how your cell phone works, how any wireless communication works, how your microwave oven works, how all these things that are invisible and yet happening, like how's that occurring? Like, how did we do that? How we figured that out is by the discovery of the electromagnetic spectrum and being able to use the frequencies to transmit information, right? Whether it's a radio signal in 1920 or whether it's a Netflix video, that you're streaming to your house, right? Or 5 of them that you're streaming into your house or whatever. And so let's say something is happening once per second, right? That would be a 1 hertz signal.
Okay.
We're going to talk about what those things are that are happening and what hertz actually measures, but you understand what I'm saying? It's the occurrence of something in a second.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to try and describe to you what the electromagnetic spectrum is, right? And the electromagnetic spectrum is how we send wireless communications of any kind, whether it be a radio signal, whether it be a microwave signal, or whether it be a cell phone signal, right? Or a 5G signal, whatever. Anything with a positive or a negative charge emits an electromagnetic field, okay? Anything you do. In fact, humans, we're like a collection of all fucking kinds of electromagnetic fields happening. Some of those make it out of our body and can be detected. Some of them cannot. But you have so many electrical processes and things going on that are creating these charges. And whenever that's present, electromagnetic field is present. This is just the nature of things that have a charge in our universe. Okay. And the energy that is emitted from this field is given the term radiation, which immediately makes us feel afraid.
We have triggers around that.
Of course, because the only radiation we fucking talk about is dangerous radiation. But when you go out in the sun and you feel the warmth in your skin, radiation. Okay. Anything that gives off an electromagnetic field gives off radiation. That is just energy that is given off. It's radiated by the electromagnetic field.
Right.
Most radiation is not dangerous, right? I mean, that's the fact, right? The radiation is a scary word, but it's just a term. So this electromagnetic field is a scale that starts very low and goes very high. And as it moves higher and higher, the frequency gets higher and higher. And like I said, hertz are how we measure frequency. And so what that means is, if you can imagine, electromagnetic radiation is given off in waves, okay? And like you've seen like a TV show where they'll show like some scientific equipment, and there's this like wave, like these things going up and down, up and down, up and down, oscillating. It's called going up and down, up and down. The distance between the peaks of those waves is the frequency, right? And so something that's like, say, your radio, you tune into like a 94.5 megahertz station, right? That's 94.5 million times a second that wave is peaking, right? You understand what I'm saying? So these waves that are happening are giving off this radiation, but that doesn't make it dangerous. Frequency is not dangerous. It's just a fact that as things climb up this spectrum, the frequency increases as well. How much energy is radiating off there is a different thing, right? And that plays into whether it's dangerous or not. But just increasing frequency itself, especially as we talk about where we're at when we're talking on our cell phones and stuff on the spectrum, is not in itself dangerous. So the first, kind of one of the main concepts that we need to grasp is that there's two different kinds of radiation that splits this spectrum in half. Not really in half, but just imagine it in half. That will help. The first type of radiation happens on the high end half, and it's called ionizing radiation. The reason it's called ionizing radiation is because it holds sufficient energy and can penetrate sufficiently into us that it can actually affect biological life, right? Living organisms. That starts in the UV band of so when I talk about a band, it's a section of the electromagnetic spectrum, okay? So a band of the spectrum happens to be ultraviolet light. This is the stuff that gives us skin cancer from the sun. That's why we have fucking sunblock, is because we figured out that this is the first kind of part of this electromagnetic spectrum that can actually impact biological life. That's why you get skin cancer too, by the way, and not like brain cancer or bone cancer from the sun, because it can only penetrate so far, but it penetrates far enough and it has enough energy that it can actually break the chemical bonds and stuff that are, in our cells, and then cause these free radicals and cancer and stuff like that. Okay, you understand that?
Yeah.
So that's the lowest part of this ionizing radiation part of the electromagnetic spectrum, okay, is ultraviolet.
Okay.
That's like a step above visible light, of sunlight, of what we're seeing, light bulbs, shit like that, okay? The next step, so, and I'm going to throw some numbers at you now, okay? And these are going to be big numbers, and so you have to fucking like just hold with me, okay?
I'm fine.
The ultraviolet band, the frequencies that happens at on the electromagnetic spectrum is from around 800 terahertz to 30 petahertz. So that's 800 trillion hertz. That means that wave is peaking 800 trillion times a second. Okay. Which we can't conceive of, but that's what's happening. All the way up to about 30 quadrillion hertz a second, 30 petahertz a second. Okay. So this is very high frequency energy that's happening here. A very high frequency part of the spectrum and a lot of energy. Right? But still not enough to fucking kill us, right? We get skin cancer and we came up with cream you put in our body that prevents it. Like that's where we're at, but it still can do harm, which is why we need sunscreen. So above that are X-rays, which we all have fucking heard of. We've all gotten one. But notice when you get one, what do? They lay lead all over your fucking body except the part that they're taking a picture of. Because it can't penetrate through lead. And we've come up with technological advancements to where when you go to the dentist, they shoot a single beam of X-ray. It does nothing to you. But still, they go out of the room. You notice that? They don't fucking stay in the room with you. Because this is ionizing radiation. We know that X-rays can harm us. For instance, have you ever heard that you shouldn't be too close to the TV or it'll hurt your eyesight?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Right. We all grew up with that myth.
Yeah.
You know where that comes from? It came from an actual thing. Zenith, when they first put out a line of TVs, they had some defective tubes in it that actually leaked X-ray radiation. It doesn't go very far. So this high frequency stuff, it doesn't go very far. So if you stood 5 feet from your TV, it didn't even reach you, right? You were fine. But if you watch close enough to it, it could do slight damage. That was because they had bad tubes. They fixed all that shit. The TVs we have now and the TVs that we all grew up with, you could have been fucking inches from it. It wasn't going to do shit to you. So X-rays, they operate in, they're emitted at the frequencies of about 30 quadrillion hertz per second to about 1 exahertz. That's 1 quintillion hertz. That's a shit ton, right? That's a high frequency. Okay. And then above that, above X-rays are what are called gamma rays, which if you grew up like me in the 70s, Bruce Banner was turned into the Hulk by them. But gamma rays are also given off by radioactive waste, and it will fucking kill you if you're close to it. Notice when Chernobyl melted down, the radioactive material didn't hurt people in Moscow, right? It didn't hurt people around the world. It hurt people that were close enough to it. And it went up and it rained down, and so other people were exposed. But again, these rays don't travel very far at these high frequencies, but they're incredibly ionizing, right? They break apart those bonds and can cause damage. More and more damage as you get up there. But they also operate at incredibly high frequencies. Okay? So that's ionizing radiation. So now let's talk about non-ionizing radiation. This is the energy that is given off by the electromagnetic fields on this part of this spectrum that they don't have the sufficient energy to break those, to alter biological life. Okay? And I want to say, we know this. This isn't a fucking theory. Okay? You have a microwave in your house that you just throw shit in and hit the button and go. I'm going to show you that microwaves emit signals way above what the fucking our cell phones do. Okay? This isn't stuff that we're guessing about. This has been tested for decades. This has been studied. There's whole disciplines of science. Bioelectromagnetics, which is literally doctors, scientists who run facilities and labs and research councils and all this stuff that do nothing but study the effects of electromagnetic radiation on biological life. Everything from cultures they grow in their petri discs to animals to fucking humans. Okay, so we know this stuff. If we didn't, we would all be dead. If we were off, we would be dead because we have been surrounded by these fields our whole entire life, constantly, all the time. And it's increasing more and more, and we seem to be fine. Well, I mean, physically. Mentally, we're obviously losing it.
But when it comes to non-ionizing radiation,
on the low end of the scale are called radio waves, which we're all familiar with, right? So that happens from up to about 3 gigahertz, 3 billion hertz, right? 3 billion times per second, that wave is peaking.
Mm-hmm.
And within that is all kinds of shit that we license. Remember, these are frequencies. If you've ever used a walkie-talkie, you have to be on the same channel, right?
Yeah.
That's the same frequency.
Yeah.
Same radio frequency. And there's a set of frequencies set aside for that kind of shit.
Yeah.
You can't broadcast on some radio station's frequency with one of those things.
Yeah.
You'll get in trouble because they license that, and it causes interference if you have all these signals on one frequency. And so that's why you tune your radio to different frequencies, because each one of them has licensed that particular frequency to transmit on. Okay? So radio waves operate in the very low frequency part.
Yeah.
For instance, FM radio occupies the band from 88 to 108. That's why your radio only goes from 88 to 108, is because that's the only place that FM stations exist. Okay? AM has a set of frequencies they use. CB radios, you have to license your CB station because then they have to give you a frequency for you to fucking transmit on, or else everyone's on the same thing and you can't hear shit. So radio waves occupy this low end. Radio waves are safe, obviously, because we're all alive. Radios have literally been everywhere for anyone who hears this. They've been alive, surrounded by radio signals all the time, constantly. So radio waves up to about 3 gigahertz per second. Okay. So, and by the way, cell phones, your cell phone, my cell phone, operate in this space right now. Okay. Our cell phones operate 2.5, 3 gigahertz, maybe 4, but for the most part, we're in that like high radio band of frequencies. So the next band though is called the microwave frequencies, right? The microwave band of frequencies. And again, a term we totally know.
Yeah.
We don't know how our microwaves work, but I'm about to tell you how it works. Okay. So microwaves operate from about 3 gigahertz to about 300 gigahertz. Okay. Those frequencies, the energy is more.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's still non-ionizing, and we're still on the way low end of the non-ionizing scale.
Yeah.
The way microwaves work is that it shoots a focused electromagnetic kind of beam, you could say. Not beam, that's kind of a bad word for it, but it's sending this electromagnetic field into your food. As it does that, the molecules in your food seek to align with the positive and negative charge that's happening as that wave's going. It's like positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. And it causes the molecules to move back and forth.
Yeah.
That back and forth motion causes friction, and it causes your food to heat.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your microwave it's impossible for it to alter the chemical structure of your food.
Yeah.
That was a huge conspiracy that went around.
It was.
I still know people who won't cook in microwave ovens because they think that it changes their food.
Yeah.
I don't know how many studies have been done, hundreds. And understand, when these scientists are doing these studies and then you read about them, they're real snarky about it because they're like, we fucking know this, but because you don't understand this and you won't take the steps to learn what's going on, we have to do all this bullshit to show you.
Yeah.
So they've literally done trials where they've like cooked broccoli in a microwave, cooked broccoli on the stove in a pot, and when they analyzed the nutritional content, the microwave retained all the nutritional content because all it did was cause the molecules to rub next to each other and make it hot.
Yeah.
And it
sounds like some good sex.
Yeah, rubbing together. Friction.
Sexy broccoli.
Yeah. Whereas you cook broccoli on the stove, for instance, or even steam it, it's water involved, and it actually causes those nutrients to kind of leach out and you lose some of them. So microwaves operate in this.
It's actually the opposite of what people
It's
fear.
the exact opposite, which is so often what happens. Okay. Look into stuff, people. There's information out there. As we've gotten more and more information, it's out there. I know it's hard, but sometimes if you're afraid of something, just go take a look. It's out there. Don't listen to fucking people that don't know what they're talking about, because they're always going to scare you with nonsense. And you don't need to have more things to be afraid of in this world, obviously.
There's some real things to be afraid of. We don't
Right. Let's be afraid of the real things. Yeah, not bullshit. So microwaves, and it's also like I remember in my 20s, people are like, if you stand in front of a microwave when it's running, it will sterilize you. It'll cook your nads. It will fucking bake your ovaries. You will be infertile.
Yeah, I do remember being told to not stand close
Even
to
if the microwaves were leaking like microwave radiation out at you, it does not have the energy to break or alter or change or disturb or damage or anything, any of the chemical bonds in your body. The most it could do was make your skin a little hot. Because actually, there are crowd dispersal weapons that they're testing and have used where they use focused microwave energy
Yeah.
in this spectrum of frequency of the electromagnetic
Yeah.
spectrum of, and what it does is it just makes you feel like your skin's burned a little bit. It doesn't leave a burn.
Yeah.
It doesn't damage
That's
anything.
one of the things that the video that I watched was the conspiracy video was saying. They mentioned
Right.
they have these frequencies.
And what I say to those people, because they'll be like, but it's obviously doing something to you. But it's cooking you. It's making you hot. I'm like, okay, go walk out on the asphalt with bare feet
That makes
on a
you
summer
hot.
day.
Yeah.
It's fucking hot as shit.
Yeah.
Is it altering your cells? Is it changing it? No.
Yeah.
Right? And this is even less damaging than that because that can actually burn us because of other factors in play. But because of the heat that's retained in the asphalt and all this kind of shit. This is radiant energy, right?
Yeah.
It's not being stored and collected and aggregating in some place. When you stand in the beam, you feel like your skin's a little hot and you get out and it immediately stops. You're not left with marks. It doesn't damage anything because this is non-ionizing radiation, which cannot hold enough energy. We have to get, remember, we're talking about microwaves, even on the highest end, 300 gigahertz. When we're talking about stuff that is like terahertz and petahertz, that's like fucking infinitely farther away from this. We're so far from dangerous that we might as well not be any steps towards dangerous. That's what I'm trying to get at. Okay.
Yeah.
So microwaves are not dangerous. If they were dangerous, you would not be allowed to buy one. Okay. Because if you understood the number of regulatory committees, both governmental and non-governmental, people, watchdog groups, people that do nothing but test, certify, define safety protocols for these things. That's why when something breaks, we're so surprised.
Yeah.
That's why when someone's vape blows up in their pocket, it makes the news.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world where things are, when you plug in something to the wall, do you ever expect to be blown against the other wall by some electric shock? Never. Because we live in this world of safety because we've employed all these protocols and safety measures and standards. When something does go wrong, it freaks us out, and then we start feeling completely unsafe. Well, really, it was just an exception, right?
Yeah.
And when you have that saying that the exception proves the rule, what that means is because it is exception, that means our natural state is safety. And so when things are not safe, it really throws us for a loop and we feel unsafe. When really, that's just a fucking weird thing that happened, not anything systemic, right? So above microwaves, though, so that's microwaves. Above microwaves in the non-ionizing radiation, this is the radiation that can't harm our cells, right? Is infrared. We've all heard of infrared light. We've heard of infrared goggles, of infrared whatever. So that operates from 300 gigahertz to about 400 terahertz. So we're talking 300 billion hertz, right? To 400 trillion hertz. Okay. Now I want to go back. Our cell phones operate somewhere around, say, 4 billion hertz. And now we're still in the harmless range, and we're all the way up to 400 trillion hertz, right? Way beyond this, right? Right. And that's the infrared. And again, infrared doesn't hurt us. In fact, you can go to all kinds of places and go into a tanning bed type thing, and you get infrared treatment. Right. Because
wait,
and it doesn't have the ability to alter the cells in your body.
The thing that I go into to get healing is more higher frequency, higher whatever numbers than the cell phone.
Yes, and infrared light cannot alter the cells in your body. So whatever it is they're telling you it's doing for you,
they're telling
may
me
be very
that,
dubious.
They're telling me that they used it on astronauts. They're telling me that
for what purpose did they use it on astronauts?
What was the purpose? It was
These stories are always great because they're always like they used it on astronauts
to like help regenerate their cells or something.
So I don't know. I don't know enough about this to talk about it. All I can say is it can't harm your cells. I know that.
Yeah.
So the idea that it's making your cells better, I don't know.
But they found there's like people put on their face for acne or wrinkles or
but understand, as we're getting into this infrared light, we're getting closer to the visible light spectrum, the stuff we see all around us, the sun that we sit out on the beach. I remember being a teenager and having acne, and if you went out in the sun and got a little bit tan, it went away.
Yeah.
All I know is I can tell you this: infrared light won't hurt you.
Yeah.
It can't hurt you.
Well, I know that's what they're saying. It's good for you.
Right. Because the amount of energy it takes to hurt you is not possible in the frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum that infrared exists. Okay. So then the last part, so the upper part of the non-ionizing radiation, the part of the spectrum that we know doesn't hurt us, is visible light. It's the light we see. It's the idea of the light bulb coming on, or your TV. Anything you could see, anything that glows, anything that light produces light, operates at this frequency. Is it killing us?
No.
We would all be dead. You have been under a light bulb every fucking day of your life, and this radiation is hitting you constantly all the time. We don't think about that. We think, oh, our cell phones are sending signals. No, your whole life has been in the proximity. Every electrical wire running through your house is giving off an electromagnetic field. It's operating at a certain frequency. And my point is, in doing this, is to understand we know this. We've tested this. We've studied this. We have gone through decades and decades and 100 years, basically, of fucking looking into the shit. We know what can hurt us and what can't. And what I want to demonstrate to you is that where we actually operate when it comes to things like 5G is so far below the upper limits of what can't hurt us that it might as well not even exist in our life. Non-ionizing radiation doesn't hurt you. And it goes from radio signals all the way up to visible light. And visible light is a good way to launch into a different concept because this is all about perspective.
I just want to name the range. You just said radio, you got cell phones, you got microwaves.
No, you got radio. Cell phones is not a band on the it uses frequencies on the electromagnetic spectrum. It's radio waves, microwaves, okay, infrared waves, and then visible light.
Okay.
And then that's non-ionizing. And then the ionizing starts at UV light, ultraviolet, right? And then it goes to X-rays, and then it goes to gamma rays.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the stuff that can harm us.
Stuff.
And then obviously the energy increases as you go along that scale. So gamma rays are deadly compared to UV where, it's damages you, but some people don't ever get skin cancer even though they spent their whole life on the beach. So it's not like you step out in the sun and you burn into a pile of ash, right?
Right.
Whereas gamma rays,
you're dead.
You'll have cancer within fucking days. Like, I mean, everyone watched Chernobyl, right? That was the effect.
Well, that was the title of this video that I watched, that 5G was going to be worse than Chernobyl.
If that was true. So if we were operating our cell phones on some upper limit where one more step in frequency, one more higher kind of power thing would kill us.
And I have to
that's
say,
crazy to think about.
They used that title, but they didn't even bring it around. They didn't even discuss it. There was nothing in the video that was concise or direct. It was all.
It's almost like you can't trust what you read on the internet all the time.
It wasn't reading; it was a video.
Okay, even worse. Worse.
It was a montage of theoretical ideas.
Yeah. So I explained that to you to get you to understand where we're falling when we're talking about 5G. Where are we falling on this scale? Well, we're falling all the way down at the upper end of that radio band and the very lower end of the microwave band.
Yeah.
Okay, when we're talking 5G. I want to give you an idea of, like, for instance, if we were trying to get a visual picture of how much bigger a quintillion is, right? Say, like, the gamma rays in this quintillion hertz space. Exahertz space, and where our phones operate in the gigahertz space, the billion, hertz space. Yeah. So we got billion and we got quintillion. So if you took a billion pennies and you stack them on top of each other, how far do you think that tower of pennies would reach?
I don't know.
1,000 miles. That's fucking far, right? Yeah. That's out into outer space. That's beyond our atmosphere. That's out there, right? And you think, holy shit, really? But when you stack a quintillion pennies, right? So a billion pennies is 1,000 miles, which is far. When you take a quintillion pennies and you stack it on top of each other, it reaches 1 trillion fucking miles high. Yeah. Okay. 1,000 and 1 trillion are unimaginably far from each other. Yeah. Okay. we could travel to the sun and back, right? Round trip, 93 million miles to the sun one way. So to the sun and back, 5,376 times before we would log 1 trillion miles.
Okay, yeah.
So this is an unimaginable distance.
Yeah.
The furthest things we've ever launched into space are the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft, right? We launched them in 1977. And these are the spacecraft that gave us what's called the Grand Tour. We had never seen the outer planet. We've never seen the outer planets, right? Neptune was something that we discovered by math, right? We didn't know what they looked like. So we sent these fucking things out because in 1977 there was this window of time when they were lined up and we could fly something past them and literally go one to the next using fucking gravity going around their moons and shit to like launch it out. Last year, this was in 1977, when I was 7 years old, they launched these things.
Yeah.
Last year, they just reached the inner boundary of our solar system. They're getting ready to go into interstellar space. It's kind of a broad area. It's not like a line that you're like, I'm in our solar system and now I'm not, right? It's like it's a kind of a space.
Yeah.
They reach kind of that space and they're traveling through it. They are 13.2 billion miles away. That is nowhere near 1 trillion fucking miles away. Okay. So when we're dealing with these numbers, they're not close.
Yeah.
Okay. We are not anywhere near radiation that could harm us. We are not.
Yeah.
And the reason we are is because we understand that can harm us, and people don't want to harm people, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I know that everyone thinks that there's these people out there just wanting to destroy you and kill you and hurt you, but they don't. First of all, they want your money, and if you die, you can't give it to them.
You can't make them money. That's
they want more
illogical
consumers.
about the conspiracy theories of like
It's
trying
crazy.
to destroy people and cause illness and all this stuff. It's like, you can't
Right.
be a worker and make money if you're dead or
right.
ill or sick. You're going to cost them
Right.
money. So that's just illogical.
So I mean, and like I said, like this idea, we have to understand that we're dealing with numbers that are not like the numbers we think about every day. Okay. But we've created this world where we symbolize things with numbers.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand this more from a symbolic thing that this is really far away. The radiation emitted from the sun takes 8 minutes to get to Earth. It would take the radiation from the sun 2 months to get 1 trillion miles out.
Oh.
Okay. Whereas 1,000 miles is nothing. That's like that. We're 93 million miles away. It takes 8 minutes. It takes a second to fucking go 1,000 miles. So I want to drive in the scale of this thing and just how far away we are from anything dangerous.
Yeah.
The stuff down here isn't like, well, it's possibly dangerous. We're just not sure. No, we know that's not dangerous because of all the studying we've done. I'm going to give you one more example because maybe this helps. Because I want to give you, let me just break it down this way. If we just take visible light, which we know doesn't hurt us, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
If you take visible light, that band, like you learned, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet.
Yeah.
Those are different frequencies of light.
Yes.
Our eyes see those different colors.
Yeah.
So when you look at something that's blue, it's because it's made of stuff that reflects that frequency of light and absorbs all the others. Okay? When you look at something red, same thing.
Yeah.
You don't go, hey, when I stand in front of a red thing, I feel safe. But when I stand in front of a purple thing, I feel very unsafe. I feel like it's giving me cancer. You don't think that. But actually, purple light is a much higher frequency than red light in comparison to each other, right? But it exists in a band that we know is fucking harmless because we walk around all the time and we see all this visible light, all these colors.
Yeah.
We have to always consider all this shit in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. So when someone throws at you, well, your cell phone used to operate at 2.5 gigahertz and now it's going to operate at 60 gigahertz. And you think, wow, that's a big leap. That's nothing.
Yeah.
It's fucking zero.
Yeah.
And you might as well not moved at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we take that visible light band and we take the cell phone band and you think, okay, so we say 5 gigahertz. That's a pretty high cell phone signal right now, 5 gigahertz. And then you take visible light, which is like 500 terahertz, right? Which is much faster.
Yeah.
So let's say you take that visible light, and we'll just go in the middle of it, which is like 500 terahertz. And then you compare that with what a cell phone operating at a high frequency right now, like say 5 gigahertz right now. That difference is like saying you just got a lottery scratch ticket and you scratched it off and it said you won $5. Okay.
Yeah.
And you scratch another one off and it says you won $500 million.
Yeah. That's the difference.
If you had 50 $5 tickets, do you give a shit?
Yeah.
No, right? Who cares? $5 means nothing compared to that. So in that example, visible light represents that $500 million, which is still totally harmless to us. We know that because we walk around in it all day and we're not afraid of it.
Yeah.
Okay? Our cell phones operate, they're like the $5. It's inconsequential, okay? We're nowhere near any place that could ever hurt us. So when you talk about 5G, we're talking about increasing speed.
Yeah.
That's what all these Gs are, right? 3G, 4G, 5G.
Yeah.
They're generations of speed. It's like anything else. You get a faster phone, you get a fucking faster wireless connection. There's only two ways to increase wireless communication speeds. You can increase frequency utilization, which means you can pack more information on the frequencies you're already using. Or you can increase spectrum bandwidth. In other words, you can get another chunk that gives you this open kind of frequencies that you can use.
Yeah.
That first option is not possible right now because the lower frequencies are completely full. TV, radio, CB, cell phone networks all over the fucking place. That shit has all been licensed. There's no room on that anymore because we're using it. Not because when we use it, it takes it away. It's just that if multiple people use it, it will fuck up everybody's shit, right? So that's all crowded down there. That's not possible. So the only way to increase the speed of your cell phone was to go up into a band of frequencies higher than what's going on. But again, that's like not even, I don't even know how to explain how minimal that is in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
When we're talking about going from something like 5 gigahertz to 30 gigahertz, it's might as well be zero in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about taking a step towards anything dangerous because it's so fucking far away.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
I can see why people would just skip over all this and go to the because this is not really interesting.
It's not interesting, and it's very complicated, and it's hard to imagine. That's why I'm struggling to fucking try and explain
I
this.
get it.
And here's what I can say. I spent my career involved in this stuff at various levels, everything from helping develop it and bring it to market and manage it and support it and you name it. I sat on standards bodies and commissions and things. The amount of safety and the amount of stuff that goes in when you get a product on the market, what has to happen in order for that thing to be able to be sold in our country is unbelievable. We would bring a product to market that you would never see. It went on a fucking pole somewhere in an enclosure that just looks like some green thing up on the pole in a box. We had to put that through multiple standards bodies, safety
around
tests.
the world.
Just in the United States, we had to do that.
In the
And then
United
if we
States.
wanted to sell it around the world, we had to go through theirs. If
There.
we had to sell it to the military, it was a whole other set of things and
Yeah.
safety and all this kind of shit.
Yeah.
This stuff they're not just like throwing this stuff at you and go like, what's it going to do to you? They already have fucking spent decade testing this shit.
Yeah.
5G is not new
Yeah.
to people who know about it and have been involved in making it. It's new to you because it's just starting to pop up. And now with the coronavirus, there's all these, you search that and you find all these things about 5G and all this erroneous information that is not based in reality whatsoever. So I can't stress enough. If this could kill us, 5G could kill us, we would already be dead because it's not a significant step in a direction that is scary. Because what they did with 5G is because those lower bands, the bands that they were existing in and stuff around there was so full, they went, hey, we could operate in this higher radio band, higher part of the radio band and the lower part of the microwave band. And that's higher frequencies, right, as you're moving up.
Yeah.
Because those are higher frequencies, it takes technological developments in order to use that kind of rate because the things are coming very fast now as far as the signal and things like that. What they decided was they were going to occupy that microwave band that was, around 3 gigahertz to about 300 gigahertz. Okay. Again, this is where microwave ovens operate and all that kind of shit like that. It's called microwaves because the waves get closer together. And so there's a micro distance between the fucking waves, right?
Yeah.
And for instance, when you get into that space, the technology that we've created in order to send signals at those higher frequencies, it's called millimeter wave technology. You might see that out there in the conspiracy videos and the posts as well. Again, it sounds scary, and you're like, oh my God, millimeter wave technology. It sounds so nefarious, like James Bond villain shit. The reason they call it that is because in this space of the electromagnetic spectrum, the waves are coming in like 1 to 10 millimeters apart. Because the waves are millimeters apart, it's called millimeter wave technology. That's the only reason. Because they're not that clever, really, when they name shit, and it's just very on the nose, because these are all technical engineer people.
They were talking about sandwiching all this around us. Like, so you imagine, like, a world that didn't have electricity or radios, and we were just free of all these waves being sent around us, and now we're bombarded with all of this.
Right. So here's I'm going to get to that. Hold that question. We're going to get to that talking about this, because that I understand that fear, but I'm going to explain it to you that it's actually not true. Okay. With millimeter wave technology, this is the upper end of the, this is kind of like, there are some 5G carriers that want to operate in like the 28 to 60 gigahertz space, right, of this band. So remember, it goes to 3 to 300. So we're not even near halfway into this thing, where your oven's working way kind of farther along the line there, right? It's just simply technology that uses these higher frequencies to carry information. That's what millimeter wave technology is. It uses these higher frequencies. The downside of these frequencies is they don't go very far, and they can't penetrate anything. They can't penetrate your skin at all, right? They can't go through leaves. Even rain, if it's raining too hard, it will interrupt 5 signals at this frequency, right? Of which 5G is a technology taking advantage of these frequencies. That's why they're putting so many towers up. And that's another thing you hear is like, oh, you see all these, they're putting it everywhere, so it's always near you, and they think it's from this nefarious thing. It's because,
so they can get through.
Right, it's because these signals don't travel very far. Right? The longer wavelength signals, like radio signals, travel very far. That's why you can drive in your car and you're like, holy shit, I'm getting a station from fucking some other state. With this technology, that's not possible because these higher frequencies, they don't travel as far. So we have to have more things, but they've also shrunk those things down. So they're like masts now instead of these giant towers of like, that you're used to seeing, and then they tried to make them look like trees, and it just looked like this weird alien tree in the middle of all your trees. And then, so now you'll see these things coming up that just look like little masts, and they have these little tiny thing, like it just gets a little thicker at top, and anyway, that's a 5G tower, and it's using technology that doesn't travel very far, so they have to have more towers. Okay, that's the only thing. That's the only reason. Your question was, but we're surrounded by this stuff, right? Here's the thing. These things do not aggregate. It's not like they're all combining into a giant signal, right? They don't add to each other. Imagine if I threw a grain of rice at you. Who gives a shit? Would it hurt you?
No.
No. Imagine if 1 million people each threw a single grain of rice at you. Would it hurt you?
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't. Why would it?
At the same time.
No, it
If I had
wouldn't.
1 million grains of rice.
They would all each represent just a single grain of rice hitting you.
At the same time.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Each grain of rice can only do a single grain of rice damage, correct? Right? If everyone is just throwing 1 grain of rice at you, and there's 1 million of them, they all just do a single grain of rice worth of damage to your skin, which is nothing.
Yeah, okay.
If you took all that grain of rice and put it in a bag and then fucking huck it at your head, yes.
I'm dead.
That is not how these electromagnetic signals work, though. They don't all clump into a super high frequency signal. You are getting hit constantly with continual electromagnetic radiation that is harmless around you. It doesn't matter how much there is of it. If it's all harmless, it is all harmless.
Yeah.
Even if there's 1 million 5 gigahertz signal hitting you, it doesn't do shit, right? Because they don't meet each other and go like, you know what, let's double our power, right? And then all of a sudden it's coming at you hot, It doesn't work like that. And so when people say like, well, they're just adding this and they're surrounding, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like putting up another radio station in your town. Does anyone give a shit about that? No, because it's just another harmless signal that's going to not do you any harm. And that is the same thing when it comes to 5G. I want to read a quote here real quick. Okay. I want to read this. This is interesting. It says, quote, many critics of 5G and other wireless technologies point to the fact that the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified mobile phones as, quote, possibly carcinogenic in 2011. What they don't usually mention is that the organization selected that designation also for coffee and pickled vegetables. Yeah. After a 2010 study failed to determine whether cell phones pose a cancer risk, a fact sheet on the WHO website dating back to 2002 says, quote, in the area of biological effects and medical applications of non-ionizing radiation, more than 25,000 articles have been published over the past 30 years, period. What they're saying is, we have studied this up and down, every possible way possible. We know that there is no ill effects to biological organisms by non-ionizing radiation, right? And like I explained to you, the upper end of the non-ionizing radiation part of the electromagnetic spectrum is visible light, is the sunlight we go out to feel better and have a good time in. Cell phones operate all the way on the other end of that harmless spectrum. So it's like the ultra low part of the fucking harmless, right?
Yeah.
But when you only are taking numbers that they're throwing at you and you don't have the perspective of where it fits into the grand scheme of things, it sounds really big.
Yeah.
If I'm going from 4 gigahertz to 60 gigahertz, that seems like a lot.
Yeah.
That is fucking nothing.
Yeah.
It's zero, right? It's literally might as well not even be a change.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned. So we can set our minds at ease about this shit, okay? In fact, since 1992, the National Cancer Institute has been tracking brain cancer cases and deaths. And from 1992 to last year, they've noted a continual and steady decline in cases and deaths in brain cancer. All the while, our exposure to electromagnetic radiation has
increased.
Fucking gone off the chart, right?
Yeah.
If there was danger, there would be evidence of this.
Yeah.
Okay? But there's not.
Is that like everyone's like, oh, you should not talk on your phone. You should use your headphones. You should.
None of that is true.
Yeah.
Okay? That is all emotional garbage that just gets wrapped up and spread around. And it's because the stuff is difficult to understand how it works.
Well, it was just a lot of boring stuff to listen to just now.
Yeah, it was. But now I want to get to more interesting stuff because here, I'll tell you this. When it comes to microwave non-ionizing radiation, okay, just the whole thing, the only danger that has ever been identified from that radiation is heat, right? That's why when you go out in the sun, your skin warms. It's because of the radiation from the sun causing that to heat, right? The energy it gives off produces this heat. That's why when you plug your cell phone in, if you touch it, it gets warm, right? It's because that electromagnetic field, as it's charging, it's creating this charge and it's creating this field, heat is the result. It's why fucking microwave ovens work to a certain extent, okay? Every phone you have ever bought or will buy has gone through rigorous standards because that is what, so whenever you see like, I heard that they recommended changes to manufacturers around 5G. Yeah, they did. Because these higher frequencies generate more heat, and they don't want people's phones to get so hot that they burn them, and so they put stricter standards on them to put heat sinks and things in there to dissipate that heat and use components and find ways to keep that heat from building up. That's the only danger.
Yeah,
it's like it might get hot in your hand. It's still not changing your cells. It's still not giving you cancer. There's no ability for it to do that because it simply doesn't hold enough power. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So you understand. So you get, though, that...
No, I didn't. I just said it was boring. I didn't say it was
No,
I
understand. It's totally boring.
This is the struggle because that was a lot to listen to, and I fear that people are not going to go through and listen to it because it's dead boring. And then they're just going to be like, I can't listen to this. I don't believe it.
Right.
This more inspirational... emotional thing sounds better and easier it grips my heart.
Okay, so now I want to turn it and talk about what is really behind
Yeah.
a lot of these conspiracy theories.
That'll be more interesting.
It will, because conspiracy is a weird thing, especially in our modern age.
Mhm.
Okay, and like we said at the outset, it always involves a they.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a them.
Mm-hmm.
There is some group, right? And who the group is changes, because conspiracy is not a right or left wing
No,
thing.
it's everywhere.
It's not a political ideology. And so you get people from various backgrounds and ideas snatching up conspiracy, and their boogeyman, their them,
Mm-hmm.
changes.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's like the evil corporations.
Mhm.
A lot of liberal conspiracy theories would say that, right? For some people, it's the Illuminati. Maybe it's fascist. Liberals tend to be on that thing, like the fascists are trying to do this. Or maybe it's the communists. That tends to be the right wing. The
Mhm.
communists are trying to do that. Or it's the globalist elite. Or it's international bankers. Or it's the pedophile ring, right?
Mhm.
That is this shadowy pedophile ring that's going on. Or it's Bill
Or
Gates.
it's the reptilians.
Or it's the reptilians, or it's the aliens, or it's fucking Bill Gates and his billionaire cronies that are just toying with the world, or whoever it is. But what I want to tell you is that all of those things are just overlays onto a particular group of people that all of these things started with, and that really all of these things spring from. And they are the Jews. Believe it or not, most of the conspiracies you hear, I don't care if it's fucking flat Earth,
Mm-hmm.
or it's 5G, or whatever, Federal Reserve, all that kind of shit.
Mhm.
The Jews are the
Everyone-
origin point of all of these. Not them, but the hatred of the Jews
No,
and
the
blaming
hatred.
them.
No, yeah. So they're like the humanity's scapegoat.
They are. And we're gonna take a walk through how this happened, a brief walk to how this happened, and then talk about more modern stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what I want people who are good people that I know that believe this kind of shit and are gullible to shit, what they don't understand is they're recycling and propagating shit that started from very nefarious
Really
places
bad
that
stuff.
they would not appreciate.
No. Yeah.
And so when they buy into this, they have to understand that this is just kind of a telephone game. And when you get to the first person, it tends to center around the Jews trying to take over the world and destroy the
People
Gentiles.
accusing
Yes.
them as being
They're
the
the
bad
them
guy.
of the original conspiracy, typically.
I was gonna say that I tend to be one that, because I think that conspiracies, not just I think, I've read psychology stuff that says that conspiracy theory believers are a certain personality type that tends toward that thinking. And I can, between the two of us as comparison, I can tend to be more vulnerable to that thinking and can tend down that road more. I don't ever think that you do at all, but so like I can tend toward down that road. So I speak of it as someone who tries to fight it in myself, and have had you to kind of help anchor me in reality a lot of times, because my brain doesn't like to go down the intellectual research and study. It definitely would go down the emotional, easier path. What is that path of least resistance?
Right.
My brain goes down that path.
Yeah, my personality is definitely like, whenever I hear something, my first thought is there's another side to this, and I need to fucking find out what that is.
I'm finally getting to that from being married to you for 29 years. Our brains are becoming one, and
They totally are.
I do tend to think that way now, but I can still like feel when I watch that video, I'm like, observing in myself both the old tendency to follow that and my current place of like, okay, this isn't making sense. This is really taking a lot. This will take a lot of work to really intellectually make this work.
Yeah. And so what I want to talk about now is how that happened. Because a lot of people would be like, shut up. What I read had nothing to do with the Jews. It did originally, I bet. In fact, when I went and searched 5G conspiracies, the first pages that came up said Israel created 5G, but they're not installing it in their nation. They're only installing it in non-Jewish nations. It filters its way through the internet. It gets picked up by soccer moms and crunchy moms and all the kind of different people out there, mostly moms, and dudes. I mean, they're crazy dudes with YouTube channels.
Yeah.
And then it gets changed and altered according. They're not gonna, it gets altered so it gets to you. But I want to show you how this happened, because there is actually a way this happened, and it's known, and we're all victim to it, and we hear stories and narratives and conspiracies all the time that trace back to this. Okay, so first, hating the Jews is a long history of the world, right? And really, it started 2,000 years ago. I mean, even before that, they had their issues with people. But if you think about the onset of Christianity, in the first couple of centuries of Christianity, the Jews weren't being persecuted because most of the early Christians were Jews, and Christianity didn't have any power, and it didn't get really going until like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century. And by the time they get to the late 4th century, Christianity gains power because Rome adopts Christianity as the religion of the empire.
Yeah.
And so now Christianity has like worldly might.
Yeah.
And the Jews murdered Jesus.
Yeah.
All of a sudden becomes a thing that whole storyline and the fucking all that shit, it wasn't as venerated as we think in the early church. It wasn't like this thing where they sat around and like bemoaned, that came later as people started like identifying holy sites and starting holidays, and Roman Catholicism really gets rolled. And it has the military might of the fucking empire. So Jews get pretty fucked up. They get dispersed and messed up and everything like that, right? And they're all throughout the Roman Empire. They're kind of spread out and stuff like that. But Rome eventually fades, and the power of the church fades also. But then on Christmas Day, 800 AD CE, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Roman Emperor, trying to revive the Roman Empire. We call it the Holy Roman Empire now, that particular part. But that empire would last all the way to Napoleon in the 1800s, right? So 1,000 years that fucking thing kept together in some form or another. In the Middle Ages, the hatred of the Jews, and as the church again regained power and this narrative of like they're the enemies of God because they killed his son, our savior, blah, blah, blah. They, once again kind of faced this threat. And throughout the Middle Ages, Jews were not able to typically hold, especially in European countries, they weren't able to hold like normal societal positions and jobs and things like that. So they were kind of pushed to the fringes of society. And at this time, because of Christianity, people they felt that collecting interest on loans and money lending was a sin. But the Jews had no such scruples, and they weren't under the authority of the fucking Roman Catholic Church and all their sin talk and shit like that. And so they were pushed to these areas that the Christian folk didn't dabble in because it wasn't profitable, and it was just kind of like a necessary evil that was happening on the fringes. But the Jews moved in because that was the only jobs that they could take because no one cared about them, and they weren't allowed to have all these other jobs, and they didn't have the restrictions of I can't charge interest, and so they made a bank. And this is where the greedy Jew and the Jewish banker and all they care about is money and all this stuff starts. It starts those tropes that are played out in all kinds of media throughout the history since then that we've seen even to this day. The idea of the greedy Jew, or the Jew that's always like, money,
Using
money,
the
money.
slur of don't Jew.
Yeah,
Jew
exactly.
down
Hey,
or something.
don't Jew me. All this kind of bullshit came from this idea that emerged out of the Middle Ages, and it emerged out of the Middle Ages because they couldn't make a bunch of money on it because of their religion, and all these other people are because they don't hold the same beliefs or whatever, so they become bad. And they become blamed for everything.
Yeah.
So when the Black Plague hits, for instance, rumors circulate around Europe talking about how Jews were poisoning the wells, and that's why. And so the Jews were kind of always the people that took the scorn, and largely it was generated from Christianity and their belief that Jesus was killed by these evil Jews.
Interesting.
Yeah. But in the modern context, in our world, while those tropes definitely were set and they do prevail to a large degree, largely the anti-Semitic stuff that goes on in our world and has gone on in the modern age, like the 20th century and onward, comes from a document that emerged right about the turn of the 20th century in the late 1800s called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It was a document that emerged in Russia, and what it was presented as was basically the notes of a meeting of these Jewish elite people who were gathering in this graveyard, and someone was taking notes. I guess they had a fucking whatever you call
Secretary.
secretary. They're like, who wants to be secretary?
got-
Not it.
I got the
Fuck, I got to
minutes,
take
George.
notes. So he takes notes. And of course, it outlays how they're plotting to take over the world and destroy the Goyim. And the Goyim are the Gentiles, non-Jews. And the way they're going to do this is through all kinds of things that you hear about all the time. They're going to destroy the structure of the nuclear family, and that's going to break down Christian values in society, right? Which is what everything's based off of.
Yeah.
There's nothing good without those things. They're going to use entertainment to hypnotize us and distract us while they carry out their nefarious plans. Like, we hear this shit applied to all kinds
Yeah.
of people in our society.
Yeah.
Not the Jews, because we're all woke and we don't want to like blame the Jews for
Yeah.
anything, but it comes from this kind of bullshit, okay? It starts with the Jews, and it starts in the protocols of the elders of Zion. The thing about, and kind of like give you a history of how this spread and how this happened, because this starts in Russia, and you think like, Russia, like how to get here. So the protocols is a booklet in 24 sections. It's not a huge book or anything like that. It's like a booklet. So after the Russian Revolution, so in 1917, the Tsar Nicholas was deposed. You know, the communist revolution happens. The Bolshevik revolution succeeds, right? And they usher in this communist government into Russia. After that, Tsarist Russians, so Russians who weren't for the revolution, they didn't want things to change, they started to use the protocols of the Elders of Zion to blame the Jews for the revolution. Even though it was like fucking obviously a huge swath of their country because they won,
Yeah.
right? And it's Russia. It's not like a small group of people. It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
They started using the protocols to blame the Jews, right? Like, well, that's why this happened, is because all these foreigners, these Jews, these, you know, whatever, that aren't Russian and they're not like us. And hey, they killed Jesus because there's Christianity in the Tsarist Russia, right? Orthodox Christianity. And so this started what is known now as the Judeo-Communist conspiracy. This would go all the way into America in the 1950s. We brought, I don't know how many people, mostly from the entertainment industry, by the way, ended up being filled with Jewish people in the entertainment industry because we had the same thing in America. They had a hard time renting places and getting jobs in places because people hated them. And so they ended up in this new frontier of the entertainment industry that opened up, and it's open jobs. Nobody's doing it. No one knows how to.
Yeah, and you weren't. The moral people weren't in the entertainment industry.
So
good Christians.
Right. So when the Committee on Un-American Activities, which met in the 50s to question people largely from the entertainment industry, it was largely based off this prejudice that Jews are communists. And it came from this Russian propaganda that started circulating that using the protocols of the Elders of Zion, this document. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was in 1917. By 1920, a Polish translation appears in Poland, and a former prosecutor for the Tsarist regime in Russia pre-revolution comes to America, and he publishes the protocols of the Elders of Zion in a newspaper. Or he starts talking about it, and he gets a benefactor, which then leads to him publishing the protocols in an American newspaper in a series of articles that they called The International Jew. Do you know who owned that newspaper, who funded that, and who totally promoted all this?
The Kennedy.
Henry Ford.
Ford.
That Ford truck you drove, Henry Ford was a Nazi sympathizer. He fucking sat on the board of his German subsidiary during all the way up till Pearl Harbor. He made weapons and contributed to the arsenal of the Nazi regime all the way up until America would not allow that because we entered the war.
You Ford people.
Yes.
Know your history.
He even took the series, the International Jew series of the protocols, and he published it in a book, and he printed 500,000 copies in multiple languages, distributed them. Okay? So if you think, well, that seems like Americana, like there's nothing that Ford's tough American truck. No, it was fucking he played a huge part in distributing anti-Semitic propaganda in America. By 1921, the Arabs, so that was in 1920, by the way, when Henry Ford was doing his little anti-Jew stuff and establishing these tropes and stuff in our society. By 1921, the Arabs in Palestine start using it to stir up resentment against Jews who were settling there at the time. They referred to the International Jewish Conspiracy, which again comes from the protocols of the Elders of Zion, where these Jews are getting together saying they're going to take over the world. By the late 1920s, two British journalists who had worked in pre-revolution Russia, they came to Britain and they put the protocols out in Britain. In the London Morning Post newspaper, it said this, quote, "The Jews are carrying it out with steadfast purpose, creating wars and revolutions to destroy the white Gentile race, that the Jews may seize the power during the resulting chaos and rule with their claimed superior intelligence over the remaining races of the world as kings over slaves." That was in the fucking newspaper in 1921 in England. When you hear conspiracies today, this is the framework that it follows. A nefarious group of people who think they're better than you. They don't want you to exist because they're the best ones. They're doing stuff to create chaos, cause damage, break stuff down. And when all said and done, they're going to come in and they're going to pick up the pieces and they're going to rule the world. That is every fucking conspiracy. I don't care if the globalists are your boogeyman, or international bankers, or a cabal of Illuminati, whatever it is, this is what they're doing. They're trying to cause damage, create chaos, and they're going to pick up the pieces and they're going to rule the world. That all comes from anti-Semitism that started circulating in the early 1900s and now made its way into Britain by the late 1920s. In 1933, Nazis used the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Hitler used it for the first time to create the first anti-Semitic action in Germany. The first thing they did was they just boycotted Jewish-owned businesses for a day. They did the whole mom thing. We're boycotting Target because they did this or whatever, right? But it started there, and it ended with 6 million of them brutally murdered. And so this stuff is not, it's dangerous to spread this kind of bullshit. But the Nazis used this. By the way, the Nazis were using it, well, Henry Ford was using it, okay? Because this was in the 30s. We hadn't entered the war yet. He was steadfast against us entering the war. He was definitely pro-Hitler, and he used the protocols of the Elders of Zion to prop up his anti-Semitic beliefs. Like I said, in the 1950s, we brought countless people, largely of Jewish descent, in front of the Congress. Many of them were blackballed from the industry altogether, never allowed to work again. Some of them were imprisoned because they refused to recant or do anything like that. This was a terrible time in American history, and it was fed by these anti-Jewish tropes and ideas that were started from the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Okay. So today it's still around. The KKK and the Aryan Nations obviously brought it into popularity in the white nationalists and Christian separatists kind of parts of our culture. But its reach is way worse than that because, like I said, it starts there and it leaks its way out, and we just put different skins on these conspiracies. But the skins, whenever we say, oh, well, the government is doing this. Okay, that's fine and all. You're separating it, but you're still taking an anti-Jewish conspiracy and just wrapping it in another thing. And we shouldn't be party to that. We shouldn't fucking be spreading shit like that. Even if it doesn't resemble that anymore, it's still, one, wrong. And you could figure that out very easily if you tried. And two, you're just playing this game of telephone where, like it or not, you're party to the transmission of this kind of bigoted shit. And so the protocols of the Elders of Zion was proven long ago. It was a forgery by Russian intelligence. Of course it was. They were trying to stir up controversy. They were trying to break the ranks of the fucking Bolshevik revolution. And so they had to start doing that, come up with an enemy. They had to point everyone's ire. Let's all unite against the Jews. That way we don't fight each other, right? It didn't work because the revolution still happened, but then they just used it to fucking pin the whole thing on the Jews, and then from there it spread, and all these ideas about the devilish Jew who was all conspiring to destroy all of us and take our money, and all this stuff gets rolling. I love this quote. I want to read this quote too because it's so relevant. So in 1935, this is in 1935, long time ago. This is before World War II for us. In 1935, a Swiss judge at a trial with two National Socialists who were charged with circulating the protocols of Elders of Zion. It was against the law to do that because it was a known hoax. It was known propaganda. It was false information. This is what the Swiss judge says in 1935. I hope that one day there will come a time when no one will any longer comprehend how in the year 1935 almost a dozen fully sensible and reasonable men could for 14 days torment their brains before a court of Bern over the authenticity or lack of authenticity of these so-called protocols. That, for all the harm they have already caused and may yet cause are nothing but ridiculous nonsense. He's saying, this is the judge, he's basically saying, like, I can't believe in 1935 we would believe such nonsense.
That we wasted our time
dude, I
and
wish
our brain power on
I could
this
get
bullshit.
you a time machine to bring you here.
I know.
You would die. You would so much rather deal with the bullshit
He's like,
you were
I
dealing
thought
with.
we were smarter than that in 1935.
I love when he says that. I can't comprehend in the year
35. We are advanced. And I can't
This is the future, folks.
We wasted our time trying to
We're
figure
like,
this
oh
shit
my
out.
God.
This
And we've
obvious
only
bullshit out.
gotten dumber. And so here's my point. The 5G conspiracies. 1, scientifically, it cannot hurt you.
Yeah.
It is impossible to hurt you. Do not believe anything you hear. They don't know what they're talking about.
No, they don't.
Just scroll on.
Yeah.
If you see someone talking about 5G and it's not fucking Verizon or AT&T or someone that has a whole bunch of letters behind their name because they're an electronics engineer, stop fucking listening. We're in the middle of a coronavirus thing. Notice that we're not listening to any other experts other than epidemiologists and people who deal in pandemic and viruses. Because they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
If some fucking mom walked up to me on the street and started telling me about coronavirus, I'd be like, fuck off.
Yeah.
I don't care what you have to say. The same thing is true for this. When you hear some woo-woo person who believes a whole string of nonsense, probably has a whole bunch of crystals on them, probably, all this other bullshit that they believe in, and they're telling you this is going to be dangerous, they don't know anything.
Yeah.
Look up the information and people that you know. AT&T does not want you dead. They want your phone bill to be paid.
Yeah.
Verizon doesn't want you dead. Same thing. They want you to pay your phone bill. Less people equals less customers, these people. So they're not looking to hurt you. And not only that, they're under such strict regulatory things that they never could hurt you. And on the other side of the coin, these conspiracy theories, of which 5G is just one of, right? There's a whole bunch out there that you can read about. You can find them easily, unfortunately. They really do all connect back to this. Anytime a conspiracy has a them involved, you got to really go, did this start as an anti-Jewish conspiracy and just find its way to me through some like other subtle coded language? Because usually, almost always, it fucking does.
Yeah.
And so be careful out there. Trying to understand what you're talking about. If you don't understand it, seek out someone who does. Yeah. There's tons of information. You can go, there's so many videos on YouTube that says 5G explained, and there will be literal dudes and women who make this stuff, build this stuff, like understand the technology that will lay it all out for you. Yeah. And it will clear up any concerns you have. So everyone relax. You're going to be fine. You're just going to get to read your conspiracy theories much faster.
Oh, no. That's what it's doing.
All right. 5G. Now you feel safe?
Yeah.
You're not afraid of 5G?
Nope.
You have all you at least understand the basics of why.
No, I totally do.
Okay, cool.
Totally get it now.
Okay.
You should have explained that stuff to me years ago. But I wasn't interested.
I used to go like, "Hey babe, can I tell you about this thing at work?" And her eyes would glass over and she'd be like, nah, I'm okay. I don't need it now." That's what happened. So don't tell me I needed to explain.
So many other things.